right, so welcome to the library's Scholarly Connections webinar series. And the topic for this afternoon is going to focus on PolicyMap. We've all probably spent enough time looking at brightly colored maps in the last couple of days. But we won't be touching on any political returns this afternoon. PolicyMap was actually developed in 2007 by a group in Philadelphia. So we have the advantage of not only being able to make very close contact with the developers, but there are places in the PolicyMap platform where there's some special features available for Philadelphia that might not be extended to other locations. The aim of PolicyMap was to make geographic data easily accessible and understandable for policymakers. It actually is a mapping application that sits on top of a data warehouse of over 50,000 indicators. So although the focus of the PolicyMap service is usually on mapping, it can also be used as a source just to download the data. Any of the data that's available for display on maps can also be downloaded in manipulatable data tables. So you can get to PolicyMap either from the library's database's A to Z list, and it's probably on at least half a dozen of our different library guides. I know that I promote use of it heavily for public health and for criminology and justice studies, which are two of the areas that I support. In PolicyMap, it's a little bit difficult to find, but there is actually a listing of all of the data sources. So let me share my screen over. Give me just a second and we'll start taking a look at it. All right, again, as I said, you can get to it through our database's A to Z list. I've already got it loaded up and open. And if you go to their support page, which is actually very useful, I frequently, when I'm working in PolicyMap, end up keeping their support pages open in another browser tab so I can switch back and forth. There is a PolicyMap primer that you can download as a Word document that I find very useful. It gives a good level of detail about different functions, just how to do things. The data directory, just to show you briefly, provides pretty extensive information about each of the data sources. The kind of data available, the topics, the years available, the geography levels that the data is available at, which is important because there are some, such as this one, where you can only get information at the county and state level. There's other data sources where you can drill down to block group level or even smaller than that. But as you can see, this is a very, very extensive list. Some of the data is publicly available from government sources, And that data is available even if you're using the public access version of PolicyMap. Other sources which they pay to acquire are available only on the subscription level, which of course we have. So when you first get into PolicyMap, the first thing that you want to do right to start is create your own account on the system. Like a lot of the other library resources, you can use it without creating a personalized account. But without a personal account, you won't be able to save your work. You won't be able to save custom created regions that you might want to use later. So it's a good idea to start off by setting that up. So the functions that PolicyMap provides, as I said, the major focus is the mapping function, which of course you can tell by looking at this and looking at the data sources is US focused. I don't believe that there's international data available. You can again download data as tables. There are some customized reports where you can specify a location and get their sort of pre-created reports. We'll take a look at the 3-layer map option later on. And there's also a data loader that allows you to upload your own spreadsheet of data and then display it on the maps. And they have pretty extensive guidelines about formatting addresses, etc., to make the uploaded data work. So starting off, the first thing that you generally want to do is find the location that you're interested in. And you can do that either by putting in an address. You can identify locations by census tract and block group, coming from the US Census, by congressional district, Senate, school district, and so on. Finding addresses by census tract is a little bit difficult because you need the full census tract number, but there's some neat little tricks that you can use to do that. If you look for an address, you can actually click on the little triangle for the address. Oh, I'm sorry, that's not what I wanted to do. For an address or a region, and it will provide, I'm looking for my little triangle. There we go. It will actually provide the census tract number for you. And then you can use that census tract number for searching. That's a far easier way of finding a census tract than trying to type in the number directly. We're going to start out though, let me put in a zip code and see what kind of information we can find about that area. The zip code tabulation area versus zip code. This is something that I learned about working on census data. Zip codes, technically, as they're defined by the post office, are a route or rather than an area. So the census translates them into what they refer to as zip code tabulation areas, or ZICTAs, they call them. So we're going to take 19146, which, if you know Philadelphia, is an area where there has been enormous growth going on, but it is also adjacent to some heavily industrial areas of the city. So let's take a look at the kind of information that we could find about the 19146 zip code area. The data available through PolicyMap is divided up into the categories that you can see across the top of the screen. You can search for data topics from the search box, but most of the time browsing through the categories is straightforward enough that you can probably find what you're looking for very easily. Within the different categories, most of them have two different types of data available. One are data layers, data that is essentially pertaining to areas. Then they have data points, which are specific address locations. So among the data layers here, we could look at median value of homes in this area. So let's take a look and see what we can find. So it takes our map, applies lots of bright colors to it, but over here in the data layer legend, we have some choices that we can make. We can choose different periods of years for our data. We can choose the actual variable that we're looking at. Right now, it's showing us the median value in dollars from 2014 to 2018, but we can change that to the percent change over 5 years, which is definitely an interesting topic for this area. So we can look at houses or block areas, because that's actually what we're defining, where there has been a decrease in home value up to an increase of 34. That's a very odd percentage that they're giving you. But this is the highest level of increase. Now, we can actually do quite a bit of editing there. We can change the array of colors, but probably more useful, we can also change the ranges. So if we wanted to look at more, granular data, we could add additional ranges here, or we could just adjust it for a different view of what we're looking for. Hi, Cindy. I'm glad you could join us.
Hi, sorry I'm late.
So we've got, Cindy, what we're looking at right now is zip code 19146, which is roughly the Point Breeze section of Philadelphia. And we're looking at percent change over 5 years in home values, because this is an area where there's been a lot of change going on. Now, as I said, the unit that we're looking at is by block group. But something that you can actually add to the map layer that you're looking at are different kinds of map boundaries. So if we come down here to the map boundaries, We can choose different features that we want to display. By default, we've got highways and roads, and we've got parks and water areas. Maybe we want to add public transit rail lines into that. But we can also decide different boundaries that we want to put in. Now we're looking at units by block groups, but maybe it would be useful to see the different census tracts that are in this area. So now you can see the numbers that have shown up within our zip code area that we defined. We've got the census tracts defined too. So this is layered data. You can't get this data for a specific building or address, but we can add on top of this point data. So one that we might want to look at for this area, especially given the real estate increases that are going on, is, there we go. Are there brownfields or Superfund sites in this area? What kind of environmental hazards are there? So now if you look closely, we've got these little orange butterfly shapes showing up that identify brownfield sites that are within the boundaries of the area that we're looking at, which if I were looking to invest in real estate in that area is certainly a topic that I would be interested in knowing about. Now for each of these data points, either the point data or the area data, while looking at the map, you can get additional information about what you're seeing. So if I find one of these little orange points and click on it, here's all of the brownfield information telling me what the property is, additional information about the property, and what the assessment was. For the real estate data, the home values, if I click on a block region, there we go. It gives me the data for the specific block that I'm clicking on, but it also gives me comparable data for the census tract, the zip code, and all the way up to national data, so that I can compare the change in home values for this location to the rest of Philadelphia, to the state, and to the US as a whole. And of course, I can download this data. I can look at it in a table. I can get a report on the data. Now, to be honest, I always find when I'm looking at this that it feels enormously cluttered and not particularly useful to me. But a very helpful thing to know about is that when you use any of the utilities to print or save an image of your map, one of the choices that you have there, it's under this more options. Okay, this is one of those things that happens when you're looking at something live. This was there yesterday that I could, it might be because yesterday I was looking at custom regions that basically you can tell your map to only show the color for the data within the boundaries that you've specified. We'll look at a custom created region in a minute and see how that works. But as you can see here, I can download or save my map as a PDF image or as an image file so that I have all of this information. I can import it into a paper or a presentation if I need to. So one of my favorite things about the PolicyMap is that you're not stuck with just using their predefined regions or areas. There are great ways within PolicyMap of defining your own customized regions. So I'm going to clear the map that we have here. Actually, I'm going to reset it back. So we start back at the default view. And I'm going to go to Philadelphia, PA, just because it's easier than trying to work from a whole big map. I want to define a region based on census tracts. So I'm going to turn the map boundaries on for that. So now we've got 2010 census tracts for Philadelphia displayed. And I'm going to enlarge this a little bit. And I'm going to create my own custom region. There's a button down here at the bottom that lets me create regions. And I can do it either by drawing the boundaries. I can do a radius, which would let me start with a specific address and define a 1 mile, 5 mile, or 10 mile radius around it. But I'm actually going to assemble a custom region. And as you can see, it gives you very clear instructions for doing anything like that. So we're going to take all of the census tracts around the Drexel campus. So we'll start with 90. There we go. 90 is selected, 91. 109. So we're moving up into Mantua. It's moving much more slowly today than it did. There we go. We'll grab 92. And all the way up here to 110. And now we're going to save the region. And I can map data onto this now. I can also just save this region, and anytime that I'm working in PolicyMap, if I go to my saved data or my saved regions, there's my Drexel census tracts. And I can go ahead and work with that. In your saved data regions or saved map regions, there is a little red icon, can be a little bit difficult to spot. But when you click on the red icon, that gives you options for editing your data region, primarily in terms of color of the boundaries or of transparency. Just changing the appearance of what you're looking at. And again, you can clear it, you can zoom to your region, download data related to it, and so on. So here in our area related to Drexel, we could use any of these data options to find different data related to it. Now, I want to take a minute to show you the 3-layer map option. But just to take a shortcut, I'm going to open up a map that I created yesterday that is looking at the Cobbs Creek area of Philadelphia. And okay, it didn't, I'm sorry, the map that I was working with didn't save, but in this area of Cobbs Creek, which is the very far western part of West Philadelphia, by using the 3-layer map function, I can take my area and I can add data for up to 3 different criteria. What it actually displays as you build the 3-layer map is any areas, usually in the block group level or census tract level, that meet the criteria that you set. So what I was playing with yesterday was I was looking at within block groups within Cobbs Creek, and I can edit the area that I'm looking at percentage, and I'm shading it by block groups. Looking at areas, I decided to look at blocks with at least 25% people between the ages of 10 and 14 living within this area. And then what I wanted to look at was, of those blocks, how many households or what block areas, in which block areas are at least 25% of the households without any type of internet access. And again, I'm going to look at my data and I'm going to say, show me block groups still. So all of the purple within this area are blocks where at least 25% of the households have children between 10 and 14, and at least 25% of the households have no internet access. So we could conclude from that that this is an area that is probably really struggling with remote education right now. And then to add to it a little bit further, we could also look at, oh, where is the unit I was looking at? Which of these blocks have at least 50% rentals? So again, all of these purple areas have middle school to early high school aged children in rented homes with no internet access. And I hope the school district is looking at that data too. Now here, this is what I tried to show you before. If I want to print this, speaking of internet access, I'm getting my mid-afternoon slow down. I can have it outline the area that I want to look at. And now I can export the image of my data. So that's really skimming the surface of what PolicyMap does. There is a, up at the top of the PolicyMap screen, there's a link to a beta version. I'm finding not so much new features, but slightly different, slightly streamlined ways of doing things through the beta version. But I haven't found it very useful to try to use those yet because they don't really connect to all of the functions and all of the available data. But let's see if you folks have any questions about using PolicyMap. If everybody, please feel free to unmute. There's only a few people here. All right.
What does the process look like for uploading your own data?
That is not something that I've done, but not only, I mean, there's not a lot of information here, but in their support, they give extensive information about how to format and upload your own data. And also, Cindy, who is participating, can attest to this because one of her neighbors is one of the PolicyMap developers. They're very friendly and very helpful. And as I said, their main base is here in Philadelphia. So they're particularly helpful to us when we're trying to work out new ways of using it. I mentioned before, but I forgot to include this. the map boundaries, there is a set group of map boundaries that they have that are applicable to just about any area. But in the documentation, in the help files, they mention that they can also provide map boundaries as specific as Philadelphia council districts, Philadelphia political wards and divisions, which would probably be of enormous interest this week. They just don't add them to the standard version, I guess because they don't want to clutter it up for anyone. But really all you have to do is email them, give them your login information, and they will add those boundary options to your PolicyMap account for you. So if I wanted to, I could very easily get all of the Philadelphia political boundaries that I could ever want added onto my maps or available for my maps. The one thing I don't think they have is Philadelphia neighborhood boundaries. Mm-hmm. I've found a couple of open source maps that claim to display neighborhood boundaries for Philadelphia. But given that I don't think you could get any two people in Philadelphia to agree on the boundaries of neighborhoods, I would take them with a grain of salt. And probably the easiest thing to do would be to turn on either the census tract or block group boundaries, and then use the create custom regions function to define a neighborhood that you want to look at.
Kathleen, thanks for that, especially that last part about getting additional boundaries added to your personal profile.
Yes, my colleague Tim, who is with us today, you're a committee person, right, Tim?
I am, yeah, so that's kind of nifty.
So political boundaries are of great interest to him.
Mm-hmm. Hey, and
very nice to be able to get that data.
Yeah, and then I wanted to say in my early explorations of this, I think when adding your own data to the map, you just had to have some common reference point, like a zip code or a census tract or something that would, you know, relate and overlap to the way they display data and organize things.
Yeah, I actually played with it once. It was a couple of years ago, so I'm not remembering all of the details, and uploaded addresses of families that participate in the neighborhood soccer program I used to run. And it was fun to see the distribution of all of the addresses around the city.
Yes, yeah, so that'd be point data.
That would be point data.
What I was talking about where it was more like zoned or whatever you call it, layered. Mm-hmm. Yeah, thanks.
All right. All right, any other questions? All right, I thank you for joining us. I think this might be Tim, do you remember whether there are more webinars scheduled for next week?
I have one more to do. I haven't scheduled it yet.
Okay, so we do have some more webinars that we're offering through the libraries this term, and we're working on a whole bunch of new topics for winter term. So keep an eye on email from the libraries and the library website, and I hope that you'll join us.
Thank you very much.
Kathleen, can I ask, would you mind if I shared this recording with my students?
Oh, not a problem at all. We'll have the recording up on the website in a couple of days. I also last year did a PolicyMap class for one of the CJS courses.
Nice.
Christine's
Okay.
Yes, in the winter.
Unsworth.
Yes,
Oh, I had no idea. See, this goes. Well, you're
it
recording.
was fun.
Love to. I mean, this is why I want us all to talk about curriculum, so we know what one another's doing. But I would love to put that as a resource in my course.
Well, you're more than welcome to share the recording, and let me stop it so that